Chapter 18 Wrath of the Frost Dragon.
"Die, beast!" Caleb roared as he plunged his sword into the massive giant's chest, the blade piercing through flesh and bone.
With a guttural cry, the giant crumbled to the ground. But Caleb barely had time to breathe before another two took its place.
"Damn it. The more I kill, the more they come."
His grip tightened around his sword, his breath heavy. He spun, slicing through another enemy, then another, his movements precise, yet growing sluggish. For every foe he cut down, 3 more seemed to rise in their place. The battlefield was relentless. Then, a sudden gust of wind howled through the chamber. Caleb's instincts screamed at him to move. Whoosh! A massive spear flew past him, barely missing his head, before embedding itself deep into the stone floor. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, forcing Caleb to skid back. His eyes darted toward the source. Standing before him was a towering figure clad in dark, jagged armor, its frame covered in thick dragon scales. The air around the creature shimmered with heat, its molten red eyes locked onto Caleb with murderous intent.
"A Drake Knight," Caleb muttered, smirking despite the exhaustion creeping into his limbs. "Judging by your size, you must be the leader."
The Drake Knight let out a low, rumbling growl.
"Well then, let's not keep you waiting."
Caleb surged forward, his sword flashing as he swung at the armored behemoth. Their blades clashed, sending sparks flying. Each strike, each movement, felt like an earthquake, the sheer force of their battle shaking the entire battlefield. The fight was even, at first. Then, in a single swift motion, the Drake Knight caught Caleb's sword mid-swing. Shatter! The steel blade fractured like glass. Caleb's eyes widened in shock.
"Shit!"
Before he could react, a massive fist crashed into his gut. Boom! The force sent him flying across the chamber, slamming into a pillar with bone-crushing impact. But the Drake Knight wasn't finished. Before Caleb could even groan in pain, the beast was already upon him. A brutal strike to his ribs, then another, and another. The onslaught was relentless. 3 devastating blows to the stomach, followed by 3 crushing strikes to his face. Blood sprayed from Caleb's mouth as the final hit sent him crashing into the stone wall. The ground trembled as the Drake Knight took a step back. Raising its massive claws, a deep rumble filled the chamber as energy gathered in its palm, a swirling mass of blinding white plasma.
"Shit! He's charging an attack."
With a deafening roar, the Drake Knight unleashed the beam. The massive blast of pure plasma ripped through the battlefield, obliterating everything in its path. Caleb barely managed to roll out of the way, but the sheer force of the attack sent him tumbling across the ruined ground. His breath was ragged, his body barely responding. The Drake Knight loomed over him, its glowing red eyes filled with merciless intent. Caleb gritted his teeth, struggling to his feet. He forced himself to focus, to ignore the pain. He wasn't done yet.
"All right. I've had enough of you," he growled, his voice laced with rage.
The temperature around him began to plummet. His eyes glowed an eerie, frost-bitten blue. The air turned bitterly cold as mist swirled around him, ice forming at his feet. The Drake Knight hesitated, sensing the sudden shift in power. Caleb took a deep breath.
"Kuraokami!"
A deafening roar echoed through the chamber. From the swirling mist, a monstrous entity emerged. A massive frost dragon, its body wreathed in glacial energy, its wings unfurled like an ice-born hurricane. The moment it appeared, the temperature in the chamber dropped to absolute zero. Everything froze. The battlefield was encased in a crystalline wasteland of ice. The Drake Knight stood in shock, its molten eyes flickering. It tried to move, but its body was stiff. Ice had already begun to creep up its scales. Before it could react, Caleb and Kuraokami struck in unison. The dragon let out a thunderous roar as Caleb lunged forward, his hand enveloped in icy energy. The strike landed, a single devastating blow. The Drake Knight's body froze solid. For a moment, there was silence. Then, crack! The frozen figure shattered into a million icy shards. Caleb collapsed to his knees, his vision swimming. His breathing was ragged, his entire body screaming in agony. The sheer power he had just unleashed had drained every ounce of his strength. He was about to fall unconscious when a sudden warmth surrounded him. Kuraokami, the frost dragon, gently curled around him, its icy breath washing over his wounds. A soft, rejuvenating energy seeped into his skin, healing him.
Caleb let out a weak chuckle. Guess I still got a long way to go, he muttered, before finally allowing himself to rest.